The night I found out who my father really was. He lied to my face and walked out of a greasy little diner like nothing had happened. A few hours later, I was staring at his name on my cracked laptop screen, realizing the man who'd just brushed me off was a billionaire. So tell me this, what would you do if a stranger dropped his wallet in front of you and a photo of your dead mother slipped out? Hi, my name is Mercy, and for 23 years, I thought I was just a tired waitress in a nowhere town, raised by a single mom who didn't have time to talk about the past. I thought my story was simple. Small apartment, small paycheck, small life. I had no idea my entire world was sitting inside a rich man's wallet, folded up in a photograph he carried next to his heart. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the night everything cracked open. It was late, almost midnight, at Emma's Diner, one of those old-school places with red leather booths and a checkered floor that stopped being shiny sometime around 1995. The neon sign outside buzzed like a dying fly, and half the letters didn't light up anymore. So instead of Emma's Diner, it looked like Emma's Din. The jukebox had been broken for months. The coffee machine rattled when it worked too hard, and the pictures of movie stars on the walls were all crooked, like nobody had the energy to straighten them. I was behind the counter wiping it down for the third time that hour, not because it was dirty, but because I needed something to do. My feet had been screaming at me since about 3 p.m. My back ached. My ponytail was coming loose, and that old clock on the wall was crawling. It said 11:43. 17 more minutes until closing. 17 minutes until I could peel off my worn-out sneakers and fall face first into bed. There were only 3 customers left. An old man in the corner reading an actual newspaper, a young couple whispering in a booth near the dead jukebox. That was it. Just them and me and the buzz of the neon sign outside leaking pink light through the windows. I was thinking about my mom, like I usually did when things got quiet. Evelyn Jackson. She died 2 years earlier, and somehow the grief still felt fresh, like a bruise that never really healed. She used to look at me with those soft brown eyes and say, "You're stronger than you think, baby. Life will knock you down, but you always get back up." And then she'd give this little smile, like she knew something I didn't, walk into the kitchen and keep going like nothing could touch her. I caught my reflection in the metal side of the coffee machine, dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Tired eyes, a name tag that had lost its shine. And I wondered, not for the first time, if she'd be proud of me or disappointed that I was still here in the same town, working the same job, living the same small life. Then the bell over the door jingled. Now usually that sound means a trucker wants more coffee, or someone's looking for directions. I turned automatically with my welcome to Emma's smile ready to go, and froze. The man who walked in didn't belong in that diner. He was tall, wearing a charcoal gray suit that looked like it had never seen a wrinkle, much less a grease stain. His shoes were so shiny I could probably see my reflection in them. A gold watch flashed on his wrist every time he moved. His silver hair was combed back perfectly, and his face looked like something carved smooth and distant handsome, in that magazine cover kind of way, but cold. He moved with the kind of quiet confidence you only see in people who have never been told no, and actually had it stick. He didn't rush, didn't look nervous, didn't look lost. He walked into that tired little diner like he owned the world, and this was just a weird detour. It was like watching a lion step into a room full of mice. The old guy in the corner peeked over his paper, raised an eyebrow, then went back to reading. The couple near the jukebox didn't even look up. But me. My heart sped up for no good reason. Something about him felt wrong. Not, I'm in danger, wrong. More like this man is carrying a storm inside him, and I'm standing too close, wrong. His eyes moved slowly around the diner, taking everything in. The cracked booths, the dead jukebox, the faded photos on the walls. His expression didn't change. He didn't smile, didn't sneer, didn't flinch. He just looked. Then his gaze landed on me. I straightened so fast I almost dropped the wet rag. Good evening, sir," I said, and my voice came out softer than I wanted. "We're about to close soon, but can I help you with anything?" He walked toward the counter, each step slow and deliberate. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep and smooth, like he was used to having people listen when he talked. "Coffee," he said. "Black. No sugar, of course," I thought. "Sure thing," I said instead. "You can sit anywhere you like." He chose a booth by the window, the one people always chose when they wanted to stare out at the empty street and think about the stuff they couldn't say out loud. My hands were trembling a little as I poured his coffee, and I scolded myself in my head. Get it together, Mercy. He's just a customer, just another person who wants caffeine and to be left alone. But deep down, I knew he wasn't just another person. I took the coffee over and set it on his table. "Here you go, sir." "Thank you," he said, still staring out the window like the darkness had something to tell him. I went back to the counter and pretended to busy myself with menus and napkins, but my eyes kept drifting back to him. The old man finished his meal, left a couple of crumpled bills on the table, and shuffled out. The young couple paid and slipped out into the night, still giggling. Suddenly, it was just me and the stranger in the suit. The diner got really quiet. I could hear the buzz of the neon sign outside, the faint ticking of the clock, the soft clink when he set his coffee cup down. He sat perfectly straight, one hand around the mug eyes far away. In that moment, he didn't look powerful or out of place. He just looked sad. Not loud, dramatic grief, but the kind that buries itself deep and never fully goes away. I was wiping a table that was already clean when he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a black leather wallet. It was the kind of wallet you see in movies, sleek, expensive, no fraying edges. He opened it and started flipping through a few bills, probably getting ready to pay, and disappear from my life forever. Then his fingers slipped, the wallet tilted, and something thin and small slid out, fluttering down to the floor like a feather. It landed face up near the edge of the booth. He didn't notice. He was still looking at the money, probably deciding whether to leave a tip. I noticed. "Excuse me, sir, you dropped." I started as I walked over. I bent down, picked up the photo, and for a second I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then my brain caught up, and my whole world flipped. It was my mother. My throat closed. My heart slammed so hard I could hear it in my ears. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the photo again. But I didn't. I stared down at it, like it was going to vanish if I blinked. It was her. Evelyn Jackson. Younger, maybe mid-20s. Her hair looser than I'd ever seen it in real life, curls framing her face. She was wearing this soft yellow dress I'd never seen before, standing somewhere with light behind her, smiling like someone had just told her the best joke in the world, and nothing bad had ever happened. She looked so happy, and not just pose for the camera happy, but really truly happy. I had never seen this picture in my life. We didn't have it at home. It wasn't in any of the albums or boxes. That version of my mom, carefree and glowing, had been a mystery to me even before she died. And here she was in a stranger's wallet. I looked up at him, my mouth dry. "Sir?" He glanced over, eyebrows raised just a little. "Yes." I held up the photo, my fingers trembling. "Why do you have this?" I asked, and my voice cracked. "Why do you have a picture of my mother?" His entire face shifted for just a split second. His eyes widened, a muscle in his jaw jumped, the corner of his mouth twitched. I saw recognition. I saw shock. I swear I saw pain. Then it was gone. His expression smoothed back into that cold, unreadable mask. "Your mother," he said slowly. "Yes," I said louder now. "That's Evelyn Jackson, my mother. She died 2 years ago." I stepped closer, holding the photo out. "So I'm asking you again, why do you have her picture?" He reached out and took the photo from me. His fingers brushed mine, and I felt a tiny tremor in his hand. Or maybe it was mine. He stared at the image, his face tight, then slid it carefully back into his wallet. "You're mistaken," he said quietly. "This isn't your mother." My stomach twisted so hard I almost doubled over. "I'm not mistaken," I said, anger rising up hot and fast. "I know my own mother's face." He stood up, pulled a 20 from his wallet, and laid it on the table. "Keep the change," he said. His voice flat, like he hadn't just punched a hole through my reality. He started toward the door. "You can't just leave," I called out, my voice echoing in the empty diner. "Tell me the truth. How did you know her?" He stopped with his hand on the door handle, his back to me. For a second, I thought he might turn around and tell me everything. Instead, he stared at the wood like it had the answers, and said in this low, tired voice, "Some truths are better left buried." Then the bell jingled, and he walked out into the night. I stood there completely alone in that ugly little diner, with my heart pounding and tears burning in my eyes. And I knew 2 things for sure. 1, that man had just lied to me. And 2, whoever he was tangled up in a part of my mother's life I knew nothing about. Let me ask you something here. If you picked up a stranger's photo and it turned out to be your dead mom, would you be able to just shrug and go home? Or would you start tearing your life apart for answers? Because I couldn't sleep. Not at all. Later that night, I sat on my bed in my tiny apartment, staring at the wall, like it might replay what happened. The clock on my phone said 3:00 a.m., but I felt wired like I could run a marathon. My brain was spinning in circles, asking the same questions over and over. Why did he have my mother's photo? How did he know her? Why did he lie? My apartment was small and plain. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a little kitchen, a living room barely big enough for an old couch and a cheap TV. The paint on the walls was faded, the furniture secondhand, but it had warmth because her presence still lingered in the little things. A scarf on the back of a chair, a mug she loved, photos of us. I looked at the framed pictures on my dresser and nightstand. My mom holding me as a baby, both of us grinning. My mom at my high school graduation, eyes shining with pride. But in every photo, even the happy ones there, was this subtle sadness, a weight behind her smile. In the photo that fell from his wallet, there was no sadness at all. "Who were you to her?" I whispered into the room. "And why didn't you tell me you existed?" Of course the room didn't answer. I wiped my eyes and marched over to my rickety little desk. I pulled out my old laptop, the one that sounded like a struggling airplane when it loaded anything, and opened a browser. I thought about what I knew. That man was rich, that much was obvious. The wallet, the watch, the suit, the attitude. And then I remembered, when he opened his wallet, I'd seen something embossed in gold inside. 1 word. A name. Douglas. So I typed Douglas Billionaire into the search bar and hit enter. The page loaded slowly, and then I saw him, staring at me and from a professional headshot on some business site. Same sharp face, same silver hair, same eyes. Charles Douglas, the page said. Real estate mogul. Net worth $4.2 billion. I clicked into the article. It was like reading about a movie character. CEO of Douglas Global Enterprises. Owns hotels, office buildings, shopping centers in every major city. Born into money. Took over the family business young. Grew it into some massive empire. There were photos of him shaking hands with politicians, cutting ribbons in front of glass towers, smiling on red carpets with other wealthy people in suits and gowns. He looked important, untouchable, so far removed from my life that it was almost laughable. I started searching his name with hers. Charles Douglas, Evelyn Jackson. Nothing. Charles Douglas, girlfriend Evelyn. Nothing. Charles Douglas Jackson Woman Flower Shop. I was grasping at straws. Still nothing. It was like my mother had been erased from his story before anyone could write it down. That hurt. I spent hours trying every combination of his name and my mother's I could think of. No trace. Either they'd been so careful no one knew, or someone had buried it very, very deep. When the first light of sunrise started creeping through my curtains, painting my room pink and gold, I was still sitting there in my navy dress from the diner, hands stiff on the keyboard, eyes burning. That's when I made a decision. If he wasn't going to tell me the truth when he walked into my world, I would walk into his. The next morning, I stood in front of my closet trying to decide what you wear to confront a billionaire about a photo of your dead mother. All I had were my waitress uniforms, a few old dresses, some jeans and t-shirts. Nothing said I belong in a glass tower. I picked the nicest thing I owned, a plain navy blue dress I had worn to my mother's funeral. I brushed my hair, pulled it back into a clean ponytail, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked exhausted and scared, but underneath that, I saw something else. Determination. Maybe stubbornness. I'm going to find out the truth, I told my reflection, no matter how uncomfortable it makes him. The bus ride into the city felt long and loud. I wasn't used to skyscrapers or crowds. The buildings got taller, the traffic thicker, the people more rushed. Everyone seemed to be on a mission, talking on phones, juggling coffee cups and briefcases, never making eye contact. When I finally got off the bus and followed the directions on my phone, I ended up standing in front of a building that made my stomach drop. It was this huge glass and steel tower that reflected the sky like a mirror. Sleek, cold, perfect. At the top, in big letters, it said, Douglas Global Enterprises, his world. I walked through the revolving doors, and it was like stepping into another planet. White marble floors, polished to a high shine, gold metal accents, a ceiling so high it felt like a cathedral. A long reception desk with a woman behind it who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, fitted blazer. People rushed through the lobby, their shoes clicking on the floor, their voices low and efficient. I felt like a stain on that marble in my simple dress and scuffed shoes. Still, I walked up to the desk, cleared my throat and tried to sound like I did this kind of thing all the time. Hi, I said. I need to see Charles Douglas. The receptionist glanced up, gave me a quick once-over, and then looked back at her computer. Do you have an appointment? No, but it's important. I just need 5 minutes. Then I'm afraid Mr. Douglas is unavailable, she said, in this polite, dismissive tone. You can call his office to schedule an appointment or send an email, and someone from his team will. I don't think you understand. I cut in my voice sharper than I meant. I felt my heart hammering again. This is about something personal, something he carries with him. Every day. Ma'am, she said. Voice firm, but still fake nice. I can't just let anyone walk in and see the CEO. You're going to have to. And then the words just came out like someone else said them through me. Tell him Evelyn Jackson's daughter is here, I said loud enough that a couple of people nearby turned their heads. Tell him it's about the photograph. She blinked, the professional mask slipping for a second. Excuse me, you heard me? I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Tell Charles Douglas that Evelyn Jackson's daughter needs to speak with him, and that it's about the photograph he keeps in his wallet. She stared at me like she was trying to decide if I was lying or insane. Then she sighed and picked up the phone. Security, she started to say. then paused like she thought better of it. Actually, wait. Let me call upstairs first. That was my first little pattern interrupt from the universe. She was going to call security, and changed her mind. She dialed another number, her voice dropping lower. Hi, this is the lobby. There's a young woman here who says she's Evelyn Jackson's daughter. She says it's about a photograph. Then she got very quiet. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right away. She hung up and looked at me with totally different eyes. Less annoyed, more confused. Maybe a little impressed. Someone will be down to escort you up, she said slowly. Please. Wait by the elevators. He'll see me. I asked. She nodded. Apparently, yes. A security guy in a black suit showed up a few minutes later, all serious and professional. Miss Jackson, he asked. Yes, I said. Right this way. The elevator shot up so fast I had to pop my ears. Floor numbers went blinking past, 30, 40, 50. When we reached 60 and the doors opened, the air even felt different. Thinner, fancier. The floor was a darker marble now, the walls a mix of wood and glass art everywhere. Through the huge windows, I could see the whole city laid out below us like a map. He led me down a long hallway and stopped at a pair of tall wooden doors. He knocked twice. Come in, a voice called from inside. That voice, calm, deep, familiar. The security guy opened the door and gestured for me to go in. I stepped inside, and there he was again. The stranger from the diner. The man with my mother's photograph in his wallet, sitting behind a massive desk in an office bigger than my entire apartment. He was wearing another perfect suit, this one dark navy. His hands were folded on the desk. His face looked carved from stone. His eyes were locked on me like I was someone's bad idea that had just walked into his day. The door clicked shut behind me. It was just the two of us. Sit down, he said, nodding toward the chair in front of his desk. I'd rather stand, I replied. My voice surprised me. It didn't sound small. One of his eyebrows ticked up by a fraction. Suit yourself. For a moment, nobody spoke. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, the faint hum of the air conditioning, the distant city sounds outside the glass. You lied to me, I finally said. He tilted his head, like he hadn't expected me to come in swinging. Did I? At the diner, I said, stepping closer to the desk. That photograph, the one you dropped, that was my mother. You know it was. You know exactly who she was. And when I asked you why you had her picture, you brushed me off and left. Why? His face didn't move, but something in his eyes did. And you came all the way here just to ask me that? He said. I came here, I said, feeling my voice rise, because you have a picture of my dead mother in your wallet, and you acted like she was nobody, and I want to know what the hell is going on. I want to know how you knew her, and why you're carrying her around like some secret you can't let go of. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. For the first time, I felt him really look at my face. Not just glance over me like a waitress taking his order, but really look. It's none of your business, he said, after a moment, his voice turning cold. What happened between your mother and me happened a long time ago, before you were even born. It has nothing to do with you. That sentence lit a fire in my chest. Not my business, I repeated, letting out a small, disbelieving laugh. She was my mother. She raised me alone. She never told me anything about you or anyone like you. And now I see your face on Google and a picture of her in your wallet, and you're telling me it has nothing to do with me. He stood up suddenly, and for a second I realized just how tall he really was. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the city, his hands in his pockets. You should leave, he said quietly. This conversation is over. No, I said. And I heard my mother's voice in my own for the first time. I'm not leaving. I've lived my whole life with half a story, and I'm not walking out now that I finally found someone who can tell me the rest. You owe me the truth. He turned around slowly. The calm, controlled look was still there, but underneath it, I saw something slipping. Anger, frustration, maybe fear. You want the truth? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. Yes, I said. I do. Fine, he said. Then sit down. I didn't. But he did. He went back to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out the same photograph. He held it in his hand for a long moment, staring at my mother's face. When he spoke, his voice was different. Softer. Less like a CEO, more like a man who'd been haunted for a long time. I met your mother 24 years ago, he started. I was 26. I had just taken over my father's company. My entire life was supposed to be about balance sheets and expansion plans, and making the Douglas name even bigger. That's all anyone ever talked about. Numbers and legacy. He paused, the corner of his mouth lifting just a little. And then one day, I walked into a flower shop. He told me how he'd gone in to buy flowers for some fancy business dinner, already half on his phone, not wanting to be there. And then he saw her. My mom. Hair pulled back, humming while she arranged roses, talking to the flowers, like they were old friends, completely unaware that he'd walked in. She didn't know who I was, he said. She didn't care. She just asked what I needed. Smiled at me like I was any other customer, and went right back to what she was doing. He looked down at the photo again. I kept finding reasons to go back. New meetings, new excuses. At first I told myself it was just because the flowers were good. After a while, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. He told me about how they started talking about how he'd spend hours in that little shop, just listening to her laugh, listening to her tell stories about her day, about how she'd tease him for not knowing the difference between peonies and gardenias, about how she didn't care about his last name or his money, and how that was exactly what drew him in. I fell in love with her, he said simply. Completely. And she loved me too. Hearing that in his voice about my mother hit me hard. I had spent my whole life thinking my mom had never really been loved, not in that big, all-consuming way. To hear that she'd had this other life before me, it made my chest ache. So what happened, I asked, even though I already knew the answer had to be bad if we ended up here. He took a deep breath and walked me through it. His family found out about Evelyn from the flower shop. They were furious. She wasn't their kind of people. No pedigree, no money, no connections. They said she was using him. They accused her of being a gold digger. They told him he was throwing away everything they'd built. My father gave me a choice, he said, voice flat. Walk away from her, or walk away from everything else. The company, the money, the Douglas name. He said if I stayed with her, I was on my own. And you chose them, I said quietly. You chose the money. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they were glossy. I chose the money, he repeated. I chose the business, the power, the easy life. And I walked away from your mother. I felt sick, actually sick. I gripped the back of the chair in front of me so hard my knuckles turned white. She loved you, I said. You know that, right? She loved you so much that she never said your name again after you left. She never talked about you. Not once. But sometimes I'd find her sitting on the couch late at night, staring at nothing with this look on her face like something had died that never got buried. His face twisted like my words physically hurt him. I have asked myself every day why I walked away, he said. Why I didn't fight harder. Why I didn't come back. I don't have an answer that makes me look any better. I was young, scared, and stupid. I chose the path of least resistance, and I have paid for that choice ever since. He held up the photo. That's why I carry this, he said, because I never stopped loving her. Not for a single day. And because this is the one thing can't buy or fix or undo. I had tears in my eyes now, but they weren't out of sympathy. They were out of anger. "You broke her," I said. "You broke my mother." She didn't sit around crying all the time, but that sadness, it never left. "You got to build your empire, live in your glass tower, be Charles Douglas billionaire," while she worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. I know he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "And I'm sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I am." I looked at him, really looked, and all I saw was a man drowning in his own regrets. But none of that brought my mom back or gave her the apology she deserved. "I need to go," I said stiffly. "Thank you for telling me the truth, but I can't be here anymore." I walked out of that office feeling like someone had taken my heart out, wrung it out like a dishcloth, and shoved it back in. I'd gotten answers, yes, but they weren't clean answers. They were messy and painful. And here's the wild part. I thought that was the end of the story. It wasn't. Back at my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and just sat. I felt so exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally, like somebody had emptied me out with a spoon. The room felt too quiet. The silence pressed on my ears. My eyes drifted to the corner of the living room where 3 cardboard boxes were stacked. My mother's things. I'd packed them up after she died, and told myself I would go through them when I was ready. Apparently ready was going to show up as a breakdown after confronting a billionaire. I dragged the first box toward me and opened it. Clothes. Her favorite sweaters, a couple of old dresses, a winter coat that still smelled faintly of her perfume. I pressed my nose to the fabric and closed my eyes for a second, just to feel closer to her. The second box had books, photo albums, some old mugs and knickknacks from the kitchen. I pulled out an album and flipped through it. Baby pictures, first day of school pictures, birthdays, Christmases, all the milestones. My mother smiled in every single photo, but now that I knew more, I could see the shadow behind her eyes more clearly. The hurt she never named. The third box was smaller. Inside was a hairbrush, a few pieces of cheap jewelry, some letters, and at the very bottom, wrapped in a piece of cloth, was a little wooden box I didn't recognize. It had a tiny brass lock on the front, but when I touched it, it fell open. The lock had never actually been turned. Stick around because what I found in that box turned this whole story on its head. Inside were little keepsakes. A dried rose, fragile and brown. A torn movie ticket from 24 years ago. A napkin with something scribbled on it in faded ink. And under all of that, wrapped in blue velvet, was a silver necklace. I lifted it out carefully. It was an oval locket on a thin chain. Old, but polished like someone had taken care of it. On the front, tiny letters were engraved, "Forever begins here." On the back, even smaller, CD to EJ. CD to EJ, Charles Douglas to Evelyn Jackson. My hands started shaking again. This wasn't just some foggy story he'd told to sound romantic. This was real. He'd given this to her. She'd kept it. For decades. I saw a little hinge on the side of the locket. My fingers fumbled with it, but it finally popped open. Inside was a tiny photo. So small, it was almost like a painting. My mother, Evelyn. Younger and absolutely radiant, looking up at a younger Charles, with so much love in her eyes that it hurt to see. And him looking back at her with the same thing. And tucked behind that tiny photo, folded so many times it was almost a speck, was a piece of paper. My heart did that painful stutter step thing again as I carefully unfolded it. The paper was thin and yellowed, like it had been waiting a long time to be read. The handwriting was familiar and messy in a way I loved. My mother's handwriting. "My dearest Mercy," it began. "If you're reading this, then I am gone, and you have found my secret. I'm sorry I never told you this while I was alive. I was afraid. Afraid of what you would think of me. Afraid of opening old wounds that never quite healed. I read every word, like the page might disappear if I blinked. She told me in her own voice about Charles, about the man who'd walked into the flower shop and changed her life, about the way he loved her, about the way he left. She didn't make excuses for him, but she didn't demonize him either. She wrote about the heartbreak, about nights spent crying, about learning to stand on her own 2 feet again, about deciding that if she was going to survive, she couldn't look back. And then she wrote about me. A few weeks after he left, she wrote, "I found out I was pregnant. With you, I thought about telling him. I almost did so many times. But I was afraid. Afraid he'd think I was trying to trap him or trying to use you to get to his money. Afraid he'd try to take you away from me, and I couldn't risk that. So I made a choice. I kept you a secret. I raised you alone. And I have never regretted that choice, not for a single second." Tears were already dropping onto the page, blurring the ink. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Mercy," she wrote. "You are my whole world, but you deserve to know the truth. You deserve to know who your father is." Then I hit the line that knocked the breath out of me. The man in this photograph is Charles Douglas. He was the love of my life, and he is your father. I stared at those words so long they started to blur. He is your father, the man from the diner, the billionaire in the glass office, the man who had just told me he walked away from my mom for money and power. My father. My whole body went numb and hot at the same time. I read the letter again and again, but the words didn't change. She explained how she'd seen him on the news sometimes, how she'd watched from far away while he built his empire, how she never told him about me, not because she hated him, but because she loved me too much to risk losing me. "I don't know if you should tell him about yourself," she wrote. "That choice is yours, my darling. Whatever you decide, I love you. I have always loved you, and I always will." I sat there on the floor with that tiny letter shaking in my hands, tears falling so fast I had to lay the paper down before I ruined it completely. "Let me ask you straight, if you found out the man who broke your mother's heart is also the father who never knew you existed, what would you do? Knock on his door and tell him everything, or keep living your life and pretend you never opened that box?" I didn't have an answer right away. I moved to my mother's old bedroom, the one I couldn't bring myself to change. I sat on her bed with the locket in my hand and stared at the ceiling. "Mama," I whispered, "what do I do? Tell me what you want me to do." But she was gone. This time, the silence was my only reply. I thought about Charles, about the way his voice had cracked when he talked about loving her, about how he'd never married, about how he carried her photo for 24 years, about how he genuinely hadn't known about me, and how I had seen the truth of that in his face. He'd made a terrible choice. My mother had paid the price. So had he in his own way. Did he deserve to know he had a daughter? Did I deserve answers from him? Did the truth deserve air? By the time the light outside faded and the apartment went dark again, I knew what I was going to do. I couldn't keep living with half the story, and I couldn't keep the truth in a box just because it was complicated. I decided to tell him. The next morning, I put the navy dress back on, brushed my hair, and this time I fastened the silver locket around my neck. It lay against my chest, heavier than it looked, like it was full of every secret my mother had ever kept. I walked back into the glass tower past the same security guard, to the same receptionist. She looked up and her eyes widened. "You're back," she said. "Do you have an appointment this time?" "No," I said, my voice calm. "But I need you to give Mr. Douglas a message." She sighed, like she was about to launch into the same script about scheduling appointments, but I didn't give her the chance. "Tell him his daughter is here," I said. "He'll understand." Her mouth actually dropped open a little. "His daughter?" "Yes," I said. I touched the locket. "Please, just call him and say that. He'll know what it means." She stared at me for a few seconds, then picked up the phone and dialed. "Mr. Douglas's office." "Yes, it's the lobby. That young woman from yesterday is here. She says she's Mr. Douglas's daughter. She paused. Whatever she heard made her eyes go wide again. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. She hung up and looked at me with this stunned, almost respectful expression. He's coming down, she said. Right now. A few seconds later, the elevator dinged. The doors slid open, and this time he wasn't in full CEO armor. No jacket, just a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up tie, loosened hair slightly messed up like he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes were red like he hadn't slept much. He took one step out of the elevator and stopped when he saw me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The lobby buzzed with people moving around us, but all of that faded into background noise. It was just me and him, 10 feet apart, with a lifetime of silence hanging in the air. His eyes dropped to the locket around my neck. He went pale. That's, he whispered. That's the necklace I gave her. I nodded. She kept it, I said. She kept it hidden in a box with other things from when you were together. He stepped closer slowly, like he was approaching something fragile. I thought she would have thrown it away, he said, was thick. After what I did, I thought she would have destroyed it. She loved you, I said quietly. Even after you left. She never stopped. He closed his eyes for a second, pain twisting his face, then opened them again and focused on me. Why are you here? He asked. Why did you come back? After everything I told you, I didn't think I'd see you again. Because I found something in her things last night, I said. Something she left for me. A letter. The locket. The photo. I unclasped the necklace and held it out to him. Open it. His hands were shaking as he took it. He turned it over, traced the engraving with his thumb, then found the hinge and snapped it open. When he saw the tiny photo inside, his face crumpled. And there's this, I said. I pulled the folded note from my pocket and handed it to him. It's from my mother. To me. But I think you need to read it too. He unfolded it carefully, smoothing it out with his fingers. I watched his eyes scan the page, watched them move faster, watched his face change. I could tell the exact moment he hit the line where she wrote, "He is your father." He froze. Every muscle in his body went rigid. The blood drained from his face. He looked up at me like the floor had just disappeared underneath him. No, he whispered. No, that can't. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. You didn't, I said, tears already sliding down my cheeks. She found out she was pregnant after you left. She made the choice not to tell you. She was afraid. He stared at me, and this time his gaze moved over my face like he was seeing me for the first time. My eyes, my nose, my mouth, the shape of my jaw, like he was trying to trace her in me. You're my daughter, he said. And the word daughter cracked right through the middle. Yes, I whispered. I'm Mercy. Mercy Evelyn Jackson. He said my name slowly like it hurt and healed at the same time. Mercy, he repeated. She named you Mercy. She said I was her mercy. I said, my voice shaking. Her gift. The one good thing that came out of loving you. He made a sound that was half sob, half gasp. The locket slipped from his fingers and hit the marble floor with a sharp little clink, but he didn't even look down. His eyes stayed on me wide and wet. I had a daughter. He said louder now. Not just to me, but to himself. To the lobby. To the whole universe. I had a daughter for 23 years, and I didn't know. People were openly staring now. They were seeing Charles Douglas, the billionaire, the CEO, the guy from the business magazines, standing in his own lobby with tears running down his face. Can I ask you something? He said, voice barely more than a whisper. May I? He swallowed. Tried again. May I hug you, if it were you? What would you have done in that moment? Would you step into that hug or back away? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to scream at him to say, "You don't get to ask me that. Not after everything." Another part of me saw the broken boy behind the expensive shirt, the one who had lost the love of his life, and just found out he'd lost 23 years with his child, too. "Okay," I said. He crossed the distance between us quickly, then slowed down right before he reached me like he was afraid of scaring me away. He wrapped his arms around me gently like I was made of glass. At first I stood stiff because I didn't know how to relax into something I'd never had. My father's arms. That was new. That was strange. But then I felt him shaking, felt his chest heaving against mine, felt his tears dripping onto my hair, heard him whispering, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," over and over like a mantra. And slowly my arms came up and held on to him too. We stood there in the middle of a busy glass lobby, while strangers walked around us pretending not to look, and absolutely looking. To them, we were just a billionaire and some girl hugging. To me, it was the first time in my life I knew what it felt like to be held by my father. Eventually, we let go. He bent down and picked up the locket from the floor, brushing it off carefully like it was made of something more valuable than gold. "Come upstairs," he said softly. "Please. We have a lot to talk about." Back in his office, everything felt different. The first time I'd felt small there, like a kid in the principal's office. This time, the power imbalance was still real, but we were both cracked open. We sat in 2 chairs by the window, the city sprawling out below us, the locket on the table between us, like neutral territory. He looked at me for a long time before he said anything. Then quietly, "You look like her. You have her eyes, her smile. But you also have something else, something that's your own." "People always said I looked like her," I said. "I just never knew who I got the rest from." "Tell me about her," he said. "Please, about her life. After I left. After I made that choice. I know I don't have the right to ask." So I told him. I told him about her working at the flower shop during the day, then cleaning offices at night. About how she'd come home exhausted, but still sit down and help me with homework. About how she'd make Halloween costumes by hand. How she'd show up to every school event, eyes shining, clapping the loudest. How she'd sometimes fall asleep on the couch, sitting up, shoes still on with the TV playing quietly, and a book slipping from her hand. She was strong, I said. Not loud strong, quiet strong. She never complained, but I could see how tired she was. All the time. She kept going anyway. He closed his eyes, closed his hands into fists on his knees. Was she happy, he asked, and his voice sounded so fragile, I almost didn't recognize it. She was happy with me, I said. She loved being my mom. We laughed a lot, even when we didn't have much. She made holidays feel like magic with almost no money at all. I paused, but in her heart, I don't think she ever fully got over you. I didn't know it was you, but sometimes I'd catch her staring at nothing with this faraway look, like she was somewhere else. Now, I know where she was. Back with you, in that flower shop. He pressed his hands to his face for a moment. I did that to her, he said. I destroyed her life. No, I said more firmly than I expected. You broke her heart. You didn't destroy her life. She built something out of the pieces. She raised me. She had friends. She had good moments. She was more than just the woman you left behind. Don't erase everything she did by turning her into a victim in your story. He dropped his hands and looked at me surprised, then nodded slowly. You're right. Old habits. I spend a lot of time rewriting events in my head to make sense of them. We sat in silence for a few seconds, just listening to the faint hum of the city below. Is there any chance, he said finally, that we could build something, you and me? I know I don't deserve it. I know I missed everything. Your first steps, your first words, your birthdays, all of it. But if you could ever let me be part of your life now in any way, I would give anything for that chance. I took a breath and felt the weight of everything press down on me. The photo in his wallet, the letter from my mom, the locket, the regret in his eyes. I'm still angry, I said. I'm angry you hurt her. I'm angry she never got to see you apologize. I'm angry that when I was little and asked why I didn't have a dad, she had to make up answers instead of telling me the truth. Those feelings are real. I'm not going to pretend they're not. You shouldn't, he said. You have every right to feel that way. But I continued. I also can't ignore the fact that you didn't know about me. You didn't choose to abandon me. That part isn't on you. And I can't ignore how you still loved her, how you still love her. So, can we have a relationship right away? I don't know. Can I call you Dad tomorrow? Definitely not. But can we start somewhere? Maybe. He swallowed hard. What does start somewhere look like to you? We get to know each other, I said. Slowly. We don't pretend we're something we're not. You're not suddenly going to be the perfect father who was always there. And I'm not going to be the daughter who grew up in this world. I glanced around the office. We begin as two adults who share blood and history and a lot of pain, and see what we can build on top of that. He nodded, tears in his eyes again. I would like that very much, he said, his voice barely holding. Another thing, I added. I'm not here for your money. I'm not saying that to sound noble. I just need you to know that. I have a job. I pay my own rent. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I can't go from that to being the billionaire's daughter overnight. My mother raised me to stand on my own feet. I am not throwing that away. I understand, he said quickly. I do. But please know, I want to help you, not because I think money can fix what I did, but because I want to support you. If you ever want to go back to school or start a business or move somewhere safer, I'd like to be part of that. But only if and when you're ready. Not yet, I said. Maybe someday. But not yet. He smiled a little. You're just like her, he said. Proud. Strong. Stubborn. I'll take that as a compliment, I said. We exchanged phone numbers before I left. His phone was new and expensive. Mine had a cracked screen and a sticker on the back. When we laid them next to each other for a moment, I couldn't help but laugh at how ridiculous the contrast was. As I turned to go, he called out, "Wait." He picked up the locket from the table and held it out. "This is yours," he said. "Your mother kept it all these years. She wanted you to have the truth in your hands. I'm sure of it." I fastened it around my neck again. It felt right there. "Thank you," I said, "for telling me the truth, for not shutting me out, for letting me be angry and not running from it. Thank you," he said back, "for walking into my lobby and changing my life." 3 months later, I stood in front of my mother's grave, with the locket warm against my skin and a bouquet of fresh roses in my hands. "Hey, Mama," I said, kneeling down to lay the flowers at the base of the stone. "I've got updates." The cemetery was quiet. Just a few birds and the sound of leaves rustling in the breeze. The sky was that kind of soft blue that makes everything feel a little gentler. I told him, I said. I told Charles the truth. I told him I'm his daughter. You were right. He really didn't know. When I showed him your letter, I thought he might pass out right there in the lobby. I laughed a little, wiping at my eyes. "You should have seen him, Mama," I said. "This powerful, untouchable man just falling apart." He cried, like really cried. And we've been having dinner once a week since then, at this little Italian place near my apartment. Nothing fancy. I made him promise no white tablecloths. I smiled. He asks about you all the time, I went on. What you like to eat. What songs you used to sing when you cooked. What your favorite movies were. He's trying to get to know the woman he loved, not just the girl in his memories. And I'm trying to give him that, piece by piece. I stood up and brushed the grass from my knees. I haven't forgiven him, I said honestly. Not completely. I don't know if I ever will. He hurt you, and that lives in me too. But I'm trying to understand him, and I'm letting him be in my life carefully with boundaries, because I think you would have wanted that from me. You were always big on second chances. I looked at her name on the stone, traced it with my fingers. Thank you for the locket, I whispered. Thank you for the letter. I know that must have been hard to write. I know you were scared, but I'm glad you trusted me with the truth. I'm glad I know where I come from now. Who I come from. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from him. Still on for dinner tonight. There's something I want to show you. Old pictures of your mom and me. If you're ready. I looked up at the sky and smiled through my tears. Yeah, I'm ready, I said softly, and texted him back. I'm ready. As I walked out of the cemetery, I felt the locket catch the light just for a second, like it was winking at me. Past, present, future, all tangled up in one little piece of silver. So here I am now telling you this story, and I want to leave you with a question that still keeps me up some nights. Do people who choose money over love deserve a second chance decades later if they're honestly sorry? Or are there some choices you just never come back from? If you were in my shoes, if you found out your absent father was a billionaire who once broke your mother's heart but had no idea you existed, would you let him into your life? Would you forgive him even a little? Or would you walk away to protect your peace? I really want to hear what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Agree with me. Argue with me. Tell me your own story. If you've ever had to decide whether to let someone back into your life after they hurt you or someone you love. And if this story hit you in any way, please like the video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because sometimes the biggest plot twists aren't in movies. They're in letters hidden at the bottom of an old box, waiting for you to be brave enough to open them.